In fact, one of the reasons I have accent is because I've been subvocalizing English for a long time while reading. Yeah, and this is a good point. I'm glad you mentioned this. This is one of the reasons. Right at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. It's I do think maybe it'll make things harder in the long run, but it's a useful little point. One of the reasons why I think that you should start with pronunciation first, and one of the reasons why I think that traditional classes, not starting with pronunciation first and just in general kind of ignoring pronunciation for the most part. The reason why I think that that's one of the single biggest problems with the way that languages are taught in schools is because of this type of problem. Now, this is just one little example, but when you are, this is why I say like your pronunciation is going to also indirectly impact your reading and your writing. And it's going to doubly impact your speaking and your listening. Because if you're reading and you're seeing the words, you're seeing, okay, and in your head you're saying them with an accent. Now at the end of the day, that's fine. If your goal is to develop a native or near native accent, and you start early on learning how to read and write without really touching on the pronunciation very much, or just like bare minimum, you're going to be reading with an accent. And when you read with an accent, you are reinforcing the wrong pronunciation, which is going to filter into your speech. It's going to filter into your ears, even if you're just reading in your head. And it's going to actually impact your speaking, or your speaking, yes, but your listening in a negative way. Now, again, as I said, this is a small point. At the end of the day, it's not the biggest deal. It's not going to cause any permanent damage. You can always work on the pronunciation later if you want, but for various reasons, this being one reason, you're just making things like, if your goal is to develop a very, very good accent, my personal opinion is you're making things harder on yourself by not addressing that first. Plus, you're also making learning how to speak harder. You're making learning how to listen harder. Because if you can't hear the difference between e and and ah, and then you're focusing on your listening skills, your brain is going to sort it out eventually. That's fine. But if you give your brain the right food, like, hey, here's the difference between these two sounds. Oh, I'm starting to hear that when I listen to this podcast, or when I listen to this audiobook, or even just like this learner dialogue, whatever it is. I'm starting to actually hear the sounds. I can actually notice, oh, this is seat, this is sit. Now I can understand more. I get my because maybe seat is one, sit is another. And when you can start hearing the difference, right, you're actually going to understand what's being said in general, not just like, well, I think it's one of those two. I know it's about seating or sitting or something like that, right? So it has this sort of focus on pronunciation first has this branching effect throughout the entire rest of the language, especially for your listening skills. If for nothing else, that's like a super big reason to do it. And that doesn't mean you have to necessarily develop the right pronunciation right away. And it's a process. You shouldn't like try to master pronunciation before doing anything else, but you should start there. That should be your first contact. And you should definitely emphasize the ear training, if nothing else. The better your pronunciation gets, the better you'll be able to subvocalize. Or you can try reading without subvocalizing. That's possible, but that can also be hard in a foreign language.